The January transfer window is here. We've seen a ton of rumors and already a massive move as Tejan Buchanan joined Inter Milan, but there is a rumor out there that an even bigger move could happen. Florian Plettenberg reported that Real Madrid definitely want Alphonso Davies. He's their desired left back next summer for Carlo Ancelotti. Madrid have allegedly asked him not to extend with Bayern. Negotiations with Bayern over a contract extension beyond 2025 has continued to stall, and a departure this summer is possible. However, Davies does feel comfortable at Bayern. So Alex, Real's interest in Davies seems to grow even bigger. Is this latest report a sign that there's some type of conversation between Davies' camp and Madrid, and there could maybe be a deal in place?
Yeah, all signs are pointing that, at the very least, Real Madrid, and Alphonso Davies' representation appear to be in some sort of informal conversations, or at the very least, I think the interest is known between the two parties. No doubt, Alphonso Davies, as is mentioned by those sources, appears to be very comfortable at Bayern, and rightfully so. It's still a massive club. It's one of the top in the world that wants to push for Champions Leagues, for trophies. Alphonso Davies is a key player there. It would certainly make sense for him to want to stay there and be comfortable there. They also gave him his first opportunity in Europe straight from the Vancouver Whitecaps, over 6 years ago now, which is wild to think. But at the same time, when a club like Real Madrid comes knocking, it's one of those where when you're at a club like Bayern, there aren't many teams that could potentially, knock on the door and open your eyes the same way that a club like Real Madrid could. So it certainly makes sense that with these negotiations ongoing, all of a sudden Davies is quietly 6 months away from being a year out of being a free agent. Having a club like Real Madrid as a potential backdoor option, it certainly makes sense to want to explore that interest.
Now, I'm a firm believer that if you're at a club like Bayern, there is only really one club to go to. Just it's Barca's not what they used to be. I have some certain issues with some of the top clubs in the Prem. I think City could be a decent fit, but in all honesty, it is Madrid. So the fact that these are the two options for Alphonso Davies right now is wild. And ESPN put out a report that Madrid have a very good relationship with Bayern. They don't really want to interfere with Bayern's plans. However, they do want to look to replicate the formula that saw Toni Kroos arrive at the Bernabeu in 2014. Sources also told ESPN that Davies would potentially be interested in a move and is attracted by Madrid's sporting project, but is also willing to hear out Bayern's final renewal offer as talks are still ongoing. So, Alex, with all that being said, how likely do you think it is that Davies does indeed leave Bayern?
Yeah, again, it continues to be. It feels like the more time goes on without a deal at Bayern, the more likely that Real Madrid could swoop in. And I found it very interesting that article by ESPN noting that these clubs do have a working relationship. It's easy to forget, but David Alaba is another name that ended up going from Bayern to Real on a free without much fuss between the two clubs. Toni Kroos was a great example. He'd won a Champions League at Bayern, yet he had 1 year left on his contract. Bayern decided to let him go for around 25 million euros. He ends up and goes and wins a bunch more with Real Madrid. I think at the end of the day, it was a pretty win-win deal, all things considered, in a scenario like that. So I think both clubs kind of realize, like, if you're Bayern, if it comes down to this summer, if you don't think you can renew him, if Madrid is able to offer 50, 60, 70 million, sure, take it. That's money you can reinvest in the squad, especially for a team like Bayern that's been pretty smart in how they splash their money. They can do a lot with 60, 70 million, depending on what's the fee. And then for Real Madrid, this is a chance for them to really upgrade the one of the main positions that they really want to shore up on their squad. I'd say they're pretty comfortable across the board, other maybe than striker, of course. That's why we hear the constant Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland links. But other than that, they're pretty comfortable bar center back as well. So I think they really want someone like Davies, because in terms of left backs go, he's pretty much the top option. And you add that his age, the fact that he's about to only have 1 year left on his deal, it makes sense for them to want to pursue. So it kind of feels like all the math is slowly adding up where, yes, as it stands, I think the favorite is for him to still end up at Bayern, just because you feel like if they offered a renewal, that would make sense. Davies would have no problem signing it, but at the same time, you feel like Madrid's kind of watching on carefully, and every day that passes on, it feels like it's more likely that there is a possibility where Davies is wearing a white kit in 2024 or 2025.
Now, this doesn't mean anything. My gut tells me he stays at Bayern. I just Like every time we read a report about the interest from Real Madrid, we always end off with, but he's comfortable at Bayern, and the option is still there. I think he wants something in mind, and again, this is just my opinion. That is, if Bayern give Davies what he wants, he'll obviously probably stay. But if not, then I think that opens the door. But knowing players like Toni Kroos and David Alaba went to Madrid, and these transfers, went pretty smoothly, and both players have found a lot of success, makes me feel like there is a chance. But looking at what Davies has done in the Bundesliga, he has played 176 games for Bayern. He's scored 8 goals, 28 assists. He's won a Champions League, 5 Bundesliga titles, 2 Pokals, 3 German Super Cups, a UEFA Super Cup, and a Club World Cup. He's 23 years old, and he's pretty much achieved everything that there is to achieve in the Bundesliga in German football. And for that reason alone is why I'd really like to see him take a new step. Becoming a little stagnant, maybe from time to time, seeing his form dip a bit. I think if he has a new project at a club like Real Madrid, but just, I don't know, give him a little bit of fresh approach to his game that he might need. So, Alex, do you think it would make sense for Davies to stay at Bayern given his success? And because, like I just mentioned, he has all these incredible achievements that if he does stay, he maybe could become heading towards being a club legend, or is going off and finding a new challenge maybe a little bit more desirable for Davies?
I think it's important to remember that Bayern is a top club. Like in my opinion, like in terms of clubs in Europe, this feels like it's a top 5 club at the very least. And on their day, they can be the best in Europe, as we've seen when they've won the Champions League and been at the top and competing. Like, this is not a bad scenario to stay in. I think it's something it's kind of been forgotten, say, in this modern transfer world where teams are always looking at moving and selling, and there's a lot more transfer movement than there used to be. You can kind of always get caught up on what's going on around you, but the fact is that remains. Bayern have been also one of the most stable clubs among the top teams, and that's important. Yes, they've had their FC Hollywood drama. They've had their fair share of drama, but despite that, they continue to win. And the fact of the matter is, no one has continued to win at the rate that they have across the across the top 5 leagues. Even Man City has had dips in form where Liverpool has snuck in and swooped out a title. Arsenal nearly almost did it. Last year, City only won their first Champions League this past year. Look at teams like Real Madrid. Even had that period where Barcelona was just dominating them in La Liga. Right? Like, even over the last 10 years, all those clubs have had dips. Yet Bayern, every year they've won the Bundesliga. They've had 2 Champions League wins in between that. Staying at a stable club like that and continuing to just become a star, a regular there, I think that's a pretty good option to consider, especially because Bayern does have a history of retaining some of its players. The funny thing is, Alphonso Davies has been at the club for around 6 years, and he is one of the club's most tenured players. But at the same time, there is still guys like Manuel Neuer, Joshua Kimmich, just guys that have been there for a long time. And that's a testament to Bayern, because at a lot of top clubs, players don't end up staying as long as some of those guys have. And I think for Davies, it can make a lot of sense to want to stay in an environment like that, especially seeing that, yes, for, every David Alaba who left, Bayern and found some success elsewhere, there's been countless examples of some Bayern players leaving and, maybe realizing the grass isn't as green on the other side. Robert Lewandowski certainly has been an example. I'd imagine he would have wanted to stay at Bayern. So for Davies, there are examples to also keep an eye on there.
Now, I want to know what's best for Davies, because I think if you ask a lot of Canadian fans, as long as they're not Barca fans, they would say, I want to see this transfer happen because it's Madrid. It's the most, I'd say it's probably the most popular club in the world, and I think there's some data out there that shows that, but it's a club that has had so many different stars, and it's a club right now that I think is in a very good position. You mentioned a player like maybe Mbappe or Haaland coming in. Imagine that speed with Vinny Jr., and then all of a sudden you have Davies down the left-hand side with Vinny Jr., Rodrigo on the other side. It's a very intriguing side to play for in a league that I think could really test Davies. But what worries me a little bit is that you have to be up for it. I think at times in the Bundesliga, because Bayern are so dominant, have been so dominant since Davies has been there, that when he does have a bit of a dip in form, it almost goes unnoticed, because at the end of the day, they're not usually punished. Going to a club like Real Madrid, when you're competing against Atletico and competing against Barca, you need to be almost flawless. And if you're not, the media can turn on you. There's a lot more pressure playing in that type of environment. And I'm not saying Davies isn't up for it, because I think he's probably shown over his career that he could be, but I'm just saying that that is a bit of a risk. Do you see it that way, or do you think that if he was to make this move, that he's ready, he could go in there, he could maybe flawlessly go into this system and be the Alphonso Davies we know him?
Yeah, look, I think to start, there is definitely huge benefit in a move like this, and I think there's reason to want to encourage a move like this. I think, for example, like we mentioned, Real is a top club. I think the big thing there is the pressure, but that pressure really is the big thing. It comes with risks. Because I think you could look at everything else. The sporting fit, Davies would make sense. But Madrid need a left back. Davies, one of the best in the world. He'd pair up nicely with Vinicius Jr. Like for a Real team loaded up on the quote unquote Galacticos, but this era of Florentino Perez, they've been going for younger Galacticos. He also fits in that range of being one of the top U24, U25 players in the world. So all that makes sense. But really, the big thing is pressure. And that can either make or break, because the reality is at a club like Real Madrid, to be able to stay at a club like that and perform for anywhere more than 3 years, it requires incredible mental strength, incredible perseverance, and of course talent, which Davies has. But the other two, it can be tough for even the best of players. Like, yeah, guys like Cristiano Ronaldo have been able to thrive at a club like that. Those are mentality machines, right? Even we've seen it with guys like Vinicius Jr., who's now become one of the top players in the world. For 3 seasons there, he was showing his potential, but even he wasn't showing the end product that maybe he needed for a club like Madrid. Fans were on him. There's pressure. Like, Vinicius needs to perform, or you got to go look at a guy like Mbappe. Got to go look at a guy who's performing elsewhere. Vinicius stepped up, and he's now one of the top wingers in the world, if not the best on his day. Well, that shows the pressure of a club like that. And for Davies, it's both exciting because if he goes and thrives in that pressure, as he's shown that he can for Bayern, he's showed up and played in some of their biggest games, biggest moments. It'll be huge because he can genuinely push and make himself the top left back in the world, one of the top defenders, one of the top young talents in the world. But if it flops, if the pressure gets to you, there you have one bad game, all of a sudden that pressure to have to perform the next one, or else people are going to be on your head. Maybe it makes you perform 2 bad games, 3 bad games. You can't afford any of that. You can't, get into any slumps. If not, there's going to be someone on your back ready to take it. That can also crumble you and derail a career. We've also seen a lot of promising young talents also have that happen at Madrid. So that's the flip side for Davies. And I think with the fact that you're at a stable environment for Bayern, it makes a little sense to weigh that up a bit heavier. Okay, if you're at a club that's a bit smaller than Bayern, you're like, all right, screw it, go make that jump to Real. At worst, you end up back at a club like you were before. Whereas if you're leaving Bayern and you say if you do fail at Real Madrid, not saying it would happen, it is a bit harder to return to another top club like Bayern. So that's also the kind of pressure where this could end up impacting your career 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Now, the nice thing for Alphonso Davies is it does sound like a win-win. You stay at a club where you're loved, continue to try to become a legend there, win trophies, and just continue to grow your game, or you make that big jump to one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest club in the world, like Real Madrid, playing with star players like Vinny Jr., Bellingham, under a coach like Ancelotti. I love both options. If you're asking me, I do hope he just kind of gets that new challenge and maybe this summer does indeed move to Real Madrid. But let me know in the comments, guys, what you want to see Alphonso Davies do. Stay at Bayern, go to Real Madrid, or maybe a different option like a Manchester City. And I hope you guys really did enjoy this video. And if you did, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.